camera fades in on a quiet auditorium in Tel Aviv. Rows of people settle into their seats as a man steps up to the podium. His name is Yonatan. He's in his 40s now, a cultural advocate, someone who has spent his life bridging worlds. He pauses for a moment, looking at the crowd before speaking. People often ask me, he begins, his voice steady but warm, why a boy from Israel grew up singing a Filipino folk song before he even knew the words to our national anthem. Why my first lullabies were not in Hebrew but in Tagalog. Why I still call a woman who wasn't my mother. The audience leans in. Yonatan's smile carries both nostalgia and reverence. I was raised in Jerusalem, in a Jewish family like many others. But in my earliest memories, I see Maria, Ate Maria, singing Bahay Kubo while stirring a pot of sinigang. I hear her voice, soft and rhythmic, wrapping me in comfort at night. I taste flavors that came from thousands of miles away, and yet they became the flavor of home. She was my caretaker, yes, but also my teacher, my sister, and in many ways, my second mother. He takes a breath, letting the weight of the words settle. But here's the real question. How did this happen? How did a woman from a small town in the Philippines end up shaping the childhood of a boy in Israel? How did two nations, so distant, so different, become woven together in ways that feel less like politics and more like family? Yonatan's gaze sweeps across the room. The answer begins long before Maria ever arrived in Jerusalem. It begins with a decision, a single vote, cast on a November day in 1947, a moment when the Philippines chose compassion over politics and gave Israel not just recognition, but hope. The lights dim slightly, as if history itself is about to unfold. Yonatan steps back and the story begins. The auditorium falls silent as Yonatan's words fade. His story takes the audience back in time, to a world scarred and uncertain. It is the year 1947. Europe is still haunted by the shadows of the Holocaust. For the Jewish people, survival has come at a heavy cost, and the dream of a homeland feels both urgent and fragile. Across the ocean, at the United Nations in New York, delegates are preparing for a historic vote. Should the state of Israel be born? In that chamber, pressure weighed heavily on smaller nations. Many were reluctant, afraid to take sides, cautious of the politics that stretched across continents. But among those nations stood the Philippines, a country young in its own independence, still rebuilding after the devastation of war. Rabbi Cohen, a fictional voice representing the Jewish community, appears on screen. His words echo with memory and gratitude. The Philippines was not a world power. They didn't have influence or armies or wealth to rival others. But what they had was compassion. And when the moment came, they chose to see our suffering. They chose to say yes. Archival photographs show Filipino delegates at the United Nations. Their vote cast in favor of partition, the creation of Israel. That single decision carried the weight of destiny. Yonatan's narration returns. It's hard to explain what a single vote means to a people who have lost almost everything. For us, it was not just politics. It was hope. It was someone across the world saying, "We see you. We believe in your future." The film lingers on this idea, how a small act of courage can ripple across generations. What began as a political choice became the seed of a relationship rooted in gratitude, empathy, and ultimately family. The screen slowly fades to black, and then from the silence, the faint sound of a woman's voice singing in Tagalog begins to rise. The voice of Ate Maria, decades later, carrying that seed into the heart of a child. The black screen slowly brightens to the streets of Jerusalem in the 1970s. Narrow alleyways, stone houses, the sound of children playing. And there, among them, walks Maria, a young woman from the Philippines, clutching a worn suitcase, her heart divided between the family she left behind and the family she hopes to support. Yonatan's voice carries over. She came from a small town in the Philippines. She didn't know Hebrew. She barely knew English. But she knew how to care, and that was enough for my family to welcome her into our home. Inside the kitchen, Maria stirs a pot of adobo. Steam rises, carrying unfamiliar spices into the air. A little boy, Yonatan at 6, peeks over the counter, curious. She smiles, teaching him a word, salamat. He repeats it clumsily and she laughs, correcting him gently. Archival-style footage shows other Filipina caregivers arriving in Israel, women who left their own children to care for someone else's. For many, it was sacrifice. For the families they served, it was transformation. Yonatan continues, Maria didn't just clean the house or care for the elderly. She sang to me at night, songs that belonged to another world. She told me stories of mythical creatures, of rivers and mountains I had never seen, and without realizing it, she gave me a second heritage. The screen shows Yonatan as a boy, sitting on Maria's lap, listening wide-eyed as she whispers a Filipino folktale. Her voice becomes a bridge, carrying culture across oceans. Rabbi Cohen's voice returns briefly. Over time, we stopped calling them maids or workers. We called them ate, sister. We called them Lola, grandmother. They became family. The scene closes with young Yonatan whispering a Tagalog prayer before bed, an image of innocence, but also of cultures quietly intertwining. The story shifts to Jerusalem in the 1990s. The city is alive with the hum of markets, the call of prayer, and the mingling of cultures. In the heart of a busy hospital, a quiet moment changes everything. David, a young Israeli engineer, is sitting in the waiting room, nervously glancing at his watch. Across the hall, a nurse in a crisp uniform walks briskly, her dark hair pulled back, her voice calm and steady as she comforts a patient. Her name is Luningning. Yonatan's narration, not all bridges are built with stone and steel. Some are built when two people look at each other and recognize something familiar in a stranger. David and Luningning meet over shared cups of coffee in the hospital cafeteria. At first, conversation is awkward. David tries out a phrase he scribbled on a napkin, Mahal Kita. His pronunciation is clumsy. Luningning bursts into laughter, covering her mouth, but her eyes soften. That single phrase, imperfect but earnest, becomes the beginning of their story. Scenes unfold like a mosaic. David learning Tagalog words one by one, writing them on sticky notes around his apartment. Luningning, in turn, practicing Hebrew, repeating phrases he whispers slowly as they walk home from work. A letter from David, full of grammatical mistakes, but ending with a line that makes Luningning tear up. You are my home. Their love grows against the backdrop of two cultures that, at times, don't fully understand each other. Family members hesitate, friends question, but David and Luningning choose patience, laughter, and commitment over doubt. Soon their wedding day arrives, a simple ceremony, Hebrew prayers blending with Filipino songs. Guests share challah bread and adobo at the same table. Two traditions meet, not in conflict, but in harmony. Yonatan's voice returns, filled with warmth. From their love came Eli, a boy who would grow up calling his grandmother Lola and his grandfather Saba. A boy who would speak two languages, not because he had to, but because his parents showed him that love is not limited by words. The screen lingers on a family portrait. David, Luningning, and Eli, their hands clasped together. Behind them, the subtle presence of two flags, Israel and the Philippines, side by side. Yonatan sums it up. The world calls it an international marriage, but for them it was simply love. And in their home, Hebrew and Tagalog weren't barriers. They were music, two melodies becoming one. The auditorium lights return, and Yonatan's voice takes on a deeper, more reflective tone. History is not just something you read in books, he says. Sometimes it lives in the language we speak at home, in the songs we sing to our children, in the faces of families that don't fit into one box because they belong to two worlds. The screen shifts to Tel Aviv today, a small classroom filled with laughter. On the blackboard, Salamat written in big letters. Yonatan is there, teaching Tagalog to young Israelis, inspired by the woman who once taught him his first words. He gestures animatedly, telling the students, this isn't just about vocabulary. This is about gratitude. This is about remembering who stood with us when the world turned away. Cut to Rabbi Cohen, older now, standing among community members. Supporting these classes, celebrating this culture, it's not charity, it's memory. It's our way of saying, we don't forget the hand that lifted us up. The story then moves to a cultural festival in Jerusalem. Booths line the square, Filipino food stalls serving adobo and halo halo, Israeli musicians tuning their instruments. In the center of it all, Eli, David, and Luningning's son, steps onto the stage. He begins to sing. First, the familiar strains of Hatikvah, Israel's national anthem. Then seamlessly, the melody flows into Lupang Hinirang, the anthem of the Philippines. His voice carries both anthems as one, blending Hebrew and Tagalog into a harmony that feels larger than music. The crowd stands in silence, some with tears in their eyes. Flags wave side by side. Two nations, two peoples, two histories, woven into a single moment. Yonatan's final words echo: a single vote in 1947, a woman's sacrifice in the 1970s, a love story in the 1990s, and now a new generation carrying both languages, both cultures in their hearts. This is what it means to build bridges, not with treaties or politics, but with love, gratitude, and family. The screen fades to black. Softly, the voice of Ate Maria returns, singing a lullaby in Tagalog, the same song that once comforted a little boy in Jerusalem. Now it comforts a nation, reminding them that humanity's greatest language has always been love. The auditorium empties. Yonatan remains alone at the podium, his voice softer now, almost like a prayer. We live in a world where walls are built faster than bridges. But if you look closely at a song, at a meal, at the word salamat, you'll see proof that kindness can cross any border, that love can speak any language, and that gratitude, once planted, can bloom for generations. He pauses, then smiles gently. This is the story of Israel and the Philippines. But more than that, it is the story of how humanity survives, not through power or politics, but through compassion. The screen fades to black. White letters appear. One vote, one song, one love, a bridge that still stands.